We will go to RC3. We will go to Middlesex Middle School.
Nice try, though.
I know, I tried. See how quick people picked up on it, right? I'm beyond the break. So we got Middlesex Middle School. We got Caroline. Carolyn, how are you this morning?
Good. I answered to both, so that's fine.
Good. Thanks for joining us. Just as close to the mic as possible. We've got a big audience and folks online, so thank you.
Sure. First, I just want to say thank you to the board and to the parents for always supporting the Middlesex community. We are extremely grateful for the generosity and support of our Board of Ed and our families. I'll quickly go through the RC as it's presented in the book. First, our enrollment for next year is projected at 1,063 students, which is down only 6 students from this year. We are looking to expand our Mandarin Chinese. Currently, we have 2 sections of 6th grade, which will be moving up to 7th grade. And incoming 6th graders will now have the option to take the Mandarin Chinese. So we are asking to move our current teacher from a 0.4 to a 0.8 to accommodate the students moving into 7th grade. In our clubs and councils, it reflects the MMS budget absorbing the robotics club. We have many students from all grade levels who participate in this club, and it is a wonderful addition to our extracurricular activities. On a side note, I do want to say I heard the discussion about the American Sign Language at the high school, and I do have to say that we had started, or actually one of our wonderful 7th graders noticed the need for ASL and started an ASL club after school at the middle school. So we are on board with that as well. Moving along to building substitutes, I believe Mr. Rudel spoke about the building substitutes, so I'm going to move past that one. On our textbooks, you'll see replacements for English and math and the request for the Mandarin textbooks for 7th grade. So that's where we will need to purchase new textbooks as we expand that program into further grade levels. Our teaching supplies is relatively the same. We kept the Genius Hour. We have English, math, science, and social studies consumable teaching supplies that will have to be replaced next year. So relatively that budget has not changed. For student activities, the one difference is that we are asking for team day supplies. So 2 years ago, we had Mountain Workshop. We kept that last year and discovered that the feedback was a little bit mixed, and our teams preferred to do a team day within the school building. This year it was phenomenal. They polled the students on what they would like to do, and we had everything from yoga to wellness rooms to outside activities to STEM activities, and they were able to rotate on team and meet their other peers. Because as we know, when they come into Middlesex, it's all of the elementary schools mixing into one school, and this was a great opportunity for the staff and the students to build a day where they could collaborate and work together within the building without having anybody from the outside. The $500 that you see for the annual poetry contest is the world language poetry contest that all of our students compete in with other schools. And then I believe that's most of my budget. I do want to note that for this budget, we really believed in focusing on what we are currently working on, such as Genius Hour and Ruler, to become experts in these areas before adding new initiatives. I know there was a talk at one of the board meetings about the same thing, and we really want to focus on building this community and building up the knowledge base with the students before adding other initiatives into the budget.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Alan, anything you wanted to add from an MMS standpoint?
No, it's fairly straightforward. It advances, as we say, the Mandarin courses.
Okay. I'll kick it off real quickly, and not for big discussion, but maybe for a takeaway. And I think I'll direct some of it toward Mr. Tranberg. So I think the one thing I need a better understanding of in our investment in technology over the last bunch of years, and then this continued textbook replacement. To me, there's a disconnect in textbook replacement, in teaching supplies, and everything that we're doing to moving toward technology, stuff we should be doing to putting stuff up in the cloud, you know, and not photocopying. These students have great access to technology. They have great technology. So somewhere down the road, I need to have a better understanding of all the dollars and spent on textbooks and what's the connection to the curriculum and the technology. So, all right. And you want a high level, but
I'll actually touch on it a bit during RC 19 this
Great.
afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah.
A quick question, Dr. Dahlstrom. The team day supplies, if you break that out, the $100 per team, that's like almost just over $1 a kid. So is that enough? Like, what can you get for $1 a child?
I would love more. This was just to start the next year, is that these are more of the supplies that teachers buy to promote the team. For example, they'll buy beads and team colors. They'll buy things for the students to represent their team, to get them excited for the team day. So these are just small items that they purchase for the kids on the team.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a couple questions. One, robotics. Is that, so I'm behind robotics, but I know that it was not available to everyone because it filled up quickly and a lot of kids were not able to participate. Will this be open so that every child that wants to participate can participate, or is it still going to be only a select few? And that doesn't need to be answered right now.
It's a good question. Thank you.
Second question about Genius Hour. I was not a proponent of it, bringing it in last year. There was no survey done of the students. I'd never heard students being asked if they were interested or not. I'm wondering now if we are asking the students if they are enjoying it. And because I am hearing basically the things that I had expected, that it's adding additional stress. Students aren't happy with it. It's giving them more work. So I would be curious about that, if we're going to survey the students and see what's going on there.
Jill.
My questions are similar. I'd like an overview of robotics, where we are top to toe, Mr. Tranberg. And if we feel we're meeting the goals of the program, because I think it's, relevant to the middle school, but really it's an overall district. And so I'd love just if you have a high level, fine, but I'd really love a few minutes spent on the program, what the goals were, if we're accomplishing them, what it looks like, what enrollment looks like, if we're satisfied with that enrollment, et cetera. Similarly with Genius Hour, I know we had some things we wanted to accomplish. Where are we in the program? What are we accomplishing? What are we looking to accomplish? It's not a huge spend, but it is something we're explicitly asking kids to spend some time on. So I'd love to understand programmatically where we are in the implementation of this.
Julie.
Thank you. On Mandarin, I know we have 2 sections. I'm interested in how many students that represents, and I'm also curious if we've gone down any sections in Spanish or French with the intro to Mandarin, and or might we next year. I was also interested in I think it's general teaching. No, yes, general teaching supplies. Is that where the Genius Hour? Yes. So it's hard because all of our comps in our budget books are years that have now been impacted by the pandemic. So when we're looking at the comps, it's hard to know what a real normal year looks like, but it looks like we're running quite low. We have 60 plus budgeted for this year, and we've spent about $12,000. So does that spend all come later in the year, or is that an overly generous budget line?
What line were you looking at?
I was looking at
24011.
24011, general teaching supplies. So not to be necessarily answered right this minute, but a question.
Thank you, Julie. Dave.
So following up on clubs and councils, unfortunately, these are slightly more policy than financial, but I'm just wondering, how do we measure what the attrition rate is? It's my understanding that a lot of people are interested to sign up in the fall for different clubs and councils. Who's showing up in May and how do we track that? The other question I would have in terms of robotics, and this goes following on Jill's question, Chris, and again, this is a little more policy, but I can understand the importance of robotics, trying to get people hooked and get an interest in that for STEM purposes, but STEM is really going to come down to calculus, and it's going to come down to engineering, and it's going to come down to programming and some of the academic rigor that comes there. How do we tailor, or how do we track, what this is? And are we really teaching hard skills? Or is this just something kind of cool to play with? How do we follow on and make sure that we're actually creating that interest and providing the skill set to perform in those areas.
Just real quick on robotics, is that, do our students at Fitch have access to that?
Yes, they would. It's after school, so they
Okay.
absolutely would.
Great, thanks, John.
First, thanks to the Darien Foundation for, giving the gift and getting this
Absolutely.
program started.
Thanks for saying that.
And we knew this was coming, when we first approved the gift. Are they going to be involved in any way, shape or form going forward with support to this program?
Who's on first?
That's sort of ends the level of support. I wouldn't say exclusively if there's tangential ways to continue to support it in auxiliary ways, but financially, it's the end of the financial support.
Dennis.
Yeah, just a point with that, I think it's more of a request for, I guess, this year and future years is that I think we need to do a better job of determining what impact an approval today or yesterday is going to put on future years, like Mandarin. We're all for Mandarin, but we're adding a 0.4 this year. Are we going, what is next year going by adding this 0.4 to 0.8 this year? Are we then approving one for sixth grade as well by doing this? And I think I don't feel I'm comfortable enough to know sometimes what an addition today means for tomorrow and future years. And I think we need better clarity on that.
We had that
Better,
last year,
better
right?
forecasting.
Can you dig up what you had last year?
I can share what we had last year, and to Mrs. Best's question also of what's the enrollment? Is it impacting French or Spanish? So eventually it does, but you need to have enough students taking a class, because when it's this year, the enrollment was 2 sections worth, and I don't have the exact enrollment in my head, but those 2 sections, because the way the program works at the middle school is you take the same language for 3 years. So those 2 sections would warrant the next 2 sections, and we're anticipating 2 more. But when you hit enough students, you're going to have, it's going to come from somewhere. We have about the same number of students that are taking, so it will come from Spanish or French at some point when the numbers warranted to do that.
Just Rich, for a little clarity on, because it's one thing I highlighted on clubs and councils, the overall increase in clubs and councils is very specific to robotics and stipends, correct?
So the contractual increase is 2.5% for the DEA contract, and then everything else is just the inclusion of robotics.
In clubs and councils
councils.
throughout
Yep.
the budget. Okay, thank you. Anything else? Yes.
Just
Karen.
on
Sure.
that, can we get a breakdown of all, I don't see exactly what clubs and councils are there and the dollar amount per club and council?
Thank you. Good from a board perspective. We will move over. Board of Finance is going to submit questions. Ed, RTM education, anything from your end? Thank you, Ed. RTM F&B, Jack. Thank you, Jack.
I think, and to follow up on Mr. Cini's comment, and it is a policy. We handle certain gifts differently in the town side versus the Board of Ed side. Quite honestly, when a gift is coming in on the town side, we make sure that there's funding for it for a period of time beyond 2 years, because we know it's ultimately going to end up in the budget. And that's exactly the point that Dennis just made. So that's a policy discussion for you. And it's not a question on robotics itself, valuable course, but it's just an overall policy. The second thing, because it sort of follows the same way, at the beginning summary, when I look at the budget, one of the things I always look at is I go back to the appendix and count all the FTEs that are in the grants to say, this is what it really costs to run this school. Because there are times when the grants are going to end. And all of a sudden we have all those FTEs there that are really part of this organization that we're not doing away from. So I'd like a page up front to say, here's what our budget is FTEs, here's grant FTEs that are sitting out there. So we understand part of what's going on. If we really want to add to that, the other thing is we have many gifts and other things that are coming in that are running certain programs. That might also be a second thing, but at least on the FTEs, what's ever sitting in those grants, because you got 2 this year. And so this and robotics is very similar for what's going on. And we definitely support Mr. Deneen's comment, because we're always scratching our heads between the investment in technology. Why are we still buying books? And why are we still making photocopies and teacher materials for what's going on? Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. We'll move over to CDSP.
Thank you. Two that we had that have been talked about just as Genius Hour being received, we echo those feelings, and also the robotics questions, in addition to looking at what the gender balance is. Has there been any discussion of a wellness center or a pilot for the middle school? I think there's just a concern that there's lots of emphasis on mental health at the high school, but is there an opportunity to do that at the middle school? Lunch monitors. So in the budget, there's mention of elementary lunch monitors being paid for out of cafeteria revenues. Would you clarify if there will be lunch monitors added at Middlesex as well? And then last question is, are there any positions that are still not filled?
Thank you. CPAC?
Hi, Jamie here.
Online.
Hello?
Yes, who's this?
Jamie.
Oh, it's Jamie.
Hey, Jamie, go ahead.
We just have two questions. Sorry, they're asking to start my video. We just have two quick questions. The first is, as with DHS, we'd like to see a breakdown of professional development by.
Make sure you're speaking into the speaker, Jamie. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm having some technical. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. As with DHS, we'd like to see a breakdown by category of professional development, and more information, if possible, about what's being implemented for co-taught classes as far as professional development by outside consultants, not just internally. And the next question is, well, it's more of a comment. As we look at our plan connecting our mental health resources, I'm not sure if it was mentioned that we should include DBT in that overall discussion that we're having, and how it's being implemented along with the other mental health resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. We will go to public comment on RC03 Middlesex Middle School. Anyone in person? Anyone online, Michelle?
There are no raised hands.
Great, thank you so much. We will move on to elementary schools, RC 5, 7, 8, 9, and 10 in terms of presentations. Luke, are you taking charge here? Great, thanks for coming in person, Luke, appreciate it.
Pleasure.
So we will start out with RC 5, which is Hinley.
Great.
Go ahead,
Thank you. Luke Forshaw, principal of Oxbridge Elementary School, and I want to introduce my colleagues on Zoom. You have Natasha Torrey, interim principal at Royal, Paula Blakely, principal at Holmes Elementary, Ryan Betts, principal at Tokenique, and Carrie Snowden, the principal at Hinley. So welcome, and we'll just echo very briefly what everyone else has said, which is we really appreciate your support. We'll be brief in our updates today and are here for questions, and certainly are here for any follow-up. So thank you for all that you're doing. Thank you also to our PTOs who are represented here today for the support for our schools as well.
Just get that speaker to as close as
I will.
possible.
Let me
Thank
raise it up and I'll hunch a little. Okay. So basically, I'm going to do two things. I want to do a quick overview of how our budgeting process is zero-based, and that we look very carefully at all of our requests and our operating cost requests, but it also is formula-driven. So at a high level, the elementaries are highly collaborative. We look at the same formula to determine the operating cost of our school. The operating costs are driven by the projected enrollment. So our operating costs are in line with what they have been year over year in terms of the percentages per operating category. We have not recommended any changes in shifts for dollar amounts for operating percentages, and the dollars are driven basically from our enrollment. You'll also see our staffing is driven from those enrollment changes. And in a quick summary, the enrollment changes that we're projecting right now is that increase in the third grade at Ox Ridge, an increase in the fifth grade at Royal, and a decrease of 1 FTE at Tokenique for kindergarten as of this time. As a function of that enrollment shift, we're also requesting a additional paraprofessional at Ox Ridge as we are increasing in our class enrollment. And our lunch monitors, which I know has briefly been discussed, we are looking at a decrease in the reduction to 1 lunch monitor through the school budget as we consider carefully, and we'll do this with our director of security as he comes online, the role of our SSOs, campus monitors, paraprofessionals in providing appropriate coverage for lunch. So we're thinking about a decrease at this point, and more detail about the exact staffing and who will monitor from that population to come. At Oxbridge, another specific request, while it is not an FTE request, it is a shift, a reclassification of an existing position. Being mindful of this year with the completion of the Oxbridge School Project, we're welcoming our ELP section in full. ELP will have a proper facility, which we're thrilled about. And we want to make sure that there's a appropriate level of staffing for secretarial support. So we're requesting a recategorization of the existing 11-month secretary to a 12-month secretary position. So while not an FTE, we believe that this will provide the support necessary for the ELP program and continue the continuity between the Oxbridge School proper and the ELP program housed at Oxbridge. Our clubs and councils, which has been discussed briefly, you'll also see an increase in cost across the 5 elementaries. It's reflective of the robotics increase and the contractual step increases as Mr. Rudel outlined. I know there's been ample conversation about the billing substitute. We are appreciative of your consideration for that. That is a big request on our behalf. We are really eager to make sure that our kids have appropriate coverage every day. One thing I will note at the elementary school is that we don't have that same model where the secondary does, where teachers will cover other classes because they're small children. And we need to make sure that we have really tight supervision throughout the day. So we're appreciative of your consideration to help with substitutes in any way, shape, and form. As I mentioned, our operating costs are going to stay in line with our previously established budget calculations. The furniture requests are the same. They cover the minor incidental furniture requests year over year. And the only thing not mentioned here that we'll have more conversations that comes to RC24, but I want to say on behalf of all the elementaries and certainly Oxbridge in particular, we are very supportive of the requests coming your way in terms of special education needs, particularly Oxbridge. Our DLC program is doing marvelously. We're really thrilled to have students from across the system come to the new facility. We want to make sure that that's properly staffed. And I know my colleagues in terms of paraprofessional support are really eager to make sure that IEPs are implemented with fidelity. That is the high level summary. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. And as I mentioned, we're here for any background that you need in between this and next session.
Great. Thank you. So I'll open up to board questions, comments. Katie.
Thank you, Luke. Also just want to comment that I really appreciate your recognition of RC24 and how that relates to your school, and also of the contributions from the PTO and broader community. It's nice to hear that broad kind of landscape as you talk about the budgets. The secretarial change is a little confusing. Can you just talk about that a little bit more? As I was reading, the description, 10 months to 12 months and a retiring, and can you just walk us through that a little more?
I certainly can. So ELP currently does not have an FTE dedicated as a secretarial position. There's not. You can look at ELP's RC category. What we want to do as ELP comes to one facility is to make sure that they have the secretarial support they need. We do not request an additional secretary at this point. What we're requesting is to take the 11-month current Oxbridge secretary position. So if you consider the main office secretary position, it's 11 months. And so we're thinking that if we can reclassify that as a 12-month position, that will then give that person the opportunity to serve the ELP program over the summer, in addition to providing the extra support to them to do the ELP tasks throughout the year, providing the secretarial support for that work. There's also going to be some support from our central office team relative to enrollment. So some behind the scenes support to enrolling students in the ELP program, but sort of operating day in and day out would be the main office secretary. Part of the thinking around this as well is because we just want that school community to feel you walk in the door to Oxbridge, you have your ELP program there, you have your main office secretary there. So from a parent perspective, it feels more logical that you're interfacing with the same person who's going to serve as the main office secretary and the ELP person.
And you think that the addition of 1 month is enough to cover those 9 classes of ELP?
We do, because what we're looking at is really the support that the secretary provides to the administrative team. So the director of the ELP program is on site. And so that person will also be providing support to the overall program. It's really like I rely on my secretarial team to help me. That person would be available for Laura as well.
And you have confirmation that the existing person is open to this change?
It would still have to go through the proper process of pending your consideration and approval. It would have to go through the proper process as outlined in the secretarial contract in terms of how we walk through the consideration and hiring. But I just know that it's a great position. I think it would serve the school.
Thank you.
Dennis.
Yeah, just to build on that. So when I went through this, I'm still a little confused as to why it's being housed in Oxbridge RC versus the ELP 26 RC. So can someone explain that to me? Or I don't understand it.
Well, right now, the person is in the Oxford RC because the person is not doing any special education work. So we could,
So-
proportionate.
So prior to this year, one of the secretaries at Royal assisted ELP, and that was a 12-month secretary. And that was primarily because ELP was at Tokenique, Royal, and Oxbridge. That individual retired, and then that was not filled. So it's really following the same model that we had in the past to support ELP, whereas it was based in the schools, RC. If we were to split the person, it's hard to say what portion would you go to ELP RC 26 and what portion would go to Oxbridge, because while one of the 12 months would primarily really just be ELP, which is the summer for ESY, they are going to do work during the year, supporting Laura and supporting the program as they would support Luke. And while the comment was made, can it support another 9 classes? It's not really another 9 classes,
Right.
Because there are some ELP classes at Oxbridge currently.
But Katie brings up a good point. The capacity there is for 9 classes. So over time, want to see what the needs are. So just to get clarity, and maybe it's the way I'm reading this, we are not adding an FTE. All right, but you're moving a secretary over to Oxbridge to cover ELP.
No, it would be, I'm sorry.
That's right. The existing secretary at Oxbridge, which is an 11-month secretary, would be reclassified as a 12-month secretary instead.
And provide support to
Right,
ELP.
support. And can I just say one thing about capacity? We looked at the number of students on the caseloads of the secretaries at the middle and the high school, and we are convinced that the secretary at Oxbridge has the ability to absorb additional cases because those caseloads are so much larger.
Julie.
Thank you. And thanks for clearing that up because I was very confused. I think I'm there. On a broader level, do you all have any concerns about the staffing at Ox versus the other schools? If you take ELP out of the equation, there are 509 students next year at Oxbridge versus 353 students K-5 at Royal, which is a pretty big difference. And yet we have the same structure, principal, 2 APs, 2 psychologists, I think 2 central office admins. Is that all sufficient? Do we need to be looking at things any differently to be providing the same experience?
As the biggest school, I can say that we're well staffed. We support our students. We have a great program. So yeah.
Are we overstaffed at the other schools?
I don't think so. I really don't. I think that we, knowing the capacity and how hard our teams are working, and the fluctuation has happened year over year, where some years you have bigger classes, some years you don't. I also think that there's also challenges associated with the number of students who might have different needs in a given building. I think that we're all appropriately staffed and very appreciative for the staffing provided to the schools.
Jill.
I have a couple questions. One, it would just be helpful to understand the secretarial model at each school. It's moved a couple times in over the years. We had 2 secretaries at one point because one person was handling a lot of special ed. I know with SEDS, we've needed a lot of support. So I would just love to understand what exactly the current model looks like with this change in place, please. And you can either do that verbally or you can just put it on a paper in a little chart. My second question was about substitutes. Actually, I'll ask my second question, then I'm going to switch. My second question is about Unified. It's not in here because it's part of the grant, but it's only offered in Oxbridge, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so Shirley, when we talk about Unified Sports, can we talk about that? And can we talk about the possibility of making that something that could cross buildings? Because I know we've tried to keep kids in classrooms where we can, and so it'd be lovely for kids across the district at that age group to be able to experience Unified if possible. So sorry, it's more of a statement. And then third is substitutes. So how does it work today in your schools? If you've got a teacher out for a couple of days, what is your model, given that you can't just pull from somewhere else?
Yeah, so we're appreciative of the building substitutes that we currently have. And as Mr. Riddle noted earlier, not all schools are full in that area. So if you have building substitutes, they're your first line, you're deploying them in the morning. You're using interns, if you do have an intern, which I know is hard to fill as well. And so those are the first people that we deploy out for those positions. Otherwise, we're relying on our instructional paraprofessional teams. So each building has an allocation of instructional paraprofessionals. We use them judiciously. We don't have them in the class all day. It's a bit of we all think of it like sort of our morning Sudoku or crossword puzzle. Who goes where? How do you staff the rooms? How do you consider the needs of all the players in your building? But we do use those individuals as the next layer to provide that support. And that's sort of the current model of how we make it work. There are times where if there's a particular high amount of substitute needs that you're using other support teachers, typically you look next at literacy specialists, math specialists. They might be required to cover for a portion of a day. If that is what we're having to do, we're really judicious about that because we know there's a necessary impact if those teachers are not seeing their caseload, that there's makeups involved and so on. But that's sort of in a nutshell, the way that we cover.
Do we ever find ourselves at, how often do we find ourselves at that third tier where we're trying to slot in support specialists and don't have who we need?
More so in the years of and the height of COVID, I would say. This year, and I can speak for Oxbridge, we haven't had to. The height of COVID, though, I'm just being transparent around that, when the absences were really high and the required numbers of quarantines and days out was higher. We've watched that number come down significantly since that point. Now it's just more your first lines of your building subs, your intern if you have it, and then instructional paraprofessionals.
Okay.
Dave.
Thanks. Turning to the lunch monitors, and I apologize, this is a little more policy than budget, but we have the idea of the SSOs contributing to the lunchroom monitor. I would like to hear from our director of security if that really is consistent with what we had planned for the SSOs to be doing during the day. So I'd appreciate that feedback. And again, sorry, was unprepared to know whether that really is what we had the SSOs planning to do or not planning to do. And then I think really we should have a conversation as a board level a little more broadly around the lunchroom situation. I know we had a prior chair who thought it was a good idea to keep parents out of the lunchrooms. I think maybe we want to revisit that and think maybe we should have some parents being involved in doing some stuff like that. So I think there's a conversation we may want to have about parental involvement inside the buildings.
Prior superintendent, I think you meant to say, right?
I believe it's both.
Oh.
Thank you, Dave. Real quick. I'm assuming the answer is yes, but Marge, Rich, these substitutes, they move between buildings, right? Okay.
Yes.
All right, John.
On the lunch monitors and the funding, and I applaud the financial ingenuity in using some Chartwell's revenues to pay. Maybe give a little more detail on this, Rich, and what kind of surplus are we looking at? Are we charging our customers, i.e. students, too much in running that surplus? With inflation, we've discussed this in the finance committee a lot, but maybe if you just bring a little more color to this model and whether or not it's been used elsewhere.
Sure. So last year, the food service fund generated in excess of $200,000. It essentially replenished everything that was lost during COVID when either we were shut down or we didn't really have lunch quite as normal. This year, we're in the same model where we're probably going to generate a little over $200,000. We were actually notified by Chartwell's just last week that us and Westport are considered the flagship models for Chartwell's for their non-NSLP program, which is really a testament to how good the service has been, how good the pricing has been, and the quality of food. If we look at Westport as another, they have had Chartwell's for well over a decade. And if you actually look at the Westport model and their budget, you'll actually see they use contributions from their food service to fund custodial supplies and custodial maintenance to kind of offset their budget. Because they've been doing it for 10 years, they're kind of like ahead of us. And I think what we're seeing now is we're at a point where we have enough revenue that's been generated that we can support things that are truly related to the cafeteria and to serving lunch, which are lunch monitors. I think if you were to, fast forward a couple of years, we'll probably be in a better spot. Right now, we're kind of in that hybrid model where we still have about, I think it's 7 employees that are district-wide employees and the rest are Chartwell's employees. And so the model is through attrition. And so as individuals either retire or resign and kind of move on from the district, you'll probably see that profit grow because the expenses will be less. The benefit of Chartwell's versus doing it yourself is they have much bigger buying power than we do. They own farms across the country and they can source food. And so we've seen our expenses go down while our revenue was also improved. But we haven't increased the price of the typical lunch that individuals would have to purchase. That's been steady for a number of years here in Darien. And I think as we move forward with the Chartwell's model, you'll actually be able to use that more in terms of an offset to your budget, just as Westport does.
And just last follow-up, equipment, are we good on that front as well?
So
I know this surplus was supposed to be used for.
Yep. So one of the things we talked about in a previous finance committee is kind of taking an inventory of what we would like to replace and some aging equipment. And I think we're going to end up doing that towards the end of the school year. So even with a $200,000 plus profit this year, we'll probably be sitting on a fund balance in excess of 600,000. And possibly by the end of next year, close to $1 million. And we don't really want to sit on $1 million. That's too much money to sit on. But the benefit of having that money is then we can start replacing refrigerators and stoves and steamers and things like that, and not have to put that in a capital budget and then ask the taxpayers to pay for that. And so what you'll end up seeing is probably a higher equipment repair line item or an equipment line item where we slowly start to replace these steamers and refrigerators, some of which are pricey. If you've been on the Oxbridge Building Committee, you'll see that some of this stuff is $30,000-$40,000 a piece of equipment. And so we're going to be able to do both as that revenue kind of continues to grow.
I'm sorry, I got to jump in on and play Joan Hendricks then for a second. What are we doing with the surplus funds now? Where do they sit?
They sit in a bank account, and they're really just earning a couple % interest in this rate.
All right, and you manage that balance?
Yes.
Okay. Maybe we could talk about that at an upcoming finance meeting.
Yeah. Please.
Nothing to do with John's experience on the finance.
I'm not saying to invest in high growth stocks either.
Katie.
Rich, question about Chartwells. Do they also handle all of the non-food supplies relating to food service, the disposables?
Yes, like forks and knives and things like that. Yes.
So that's built into their budget. So how will that be impacted when the new Oxbridge cafeteria is built and comes with dishwashers and reusable, and kind of what's the one? So first part of the question, how will that be impacted next year at Oxbridge? And then second part of the question, is there budgeting consideration for moving our lunch service to a more sustainable model?
Sure. So they would just in terms of Oxbridge, they're going to do the dishes just like the kitchen staff would do there now. It's been a little difficult this year because we don't have a kitchen in Oxbridge, given the construction. But the staff at Oxbridge through Chartwells is staffed rather well. We could always, if it works out well at Oxbridge, there's no reason we couldn't kind of expand that out to the other elementary schools and eventually the middle and the high school. I think Oxbridge will be a good pilot test come next year once actually the building's up and running and we have a true cafeteria there.
So sorry, I just wanted to say then, so that shift is within the bounds of the Chartwell contract and it's something that they'll handle and it's not, okay, thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Julie.
Thank you. Changing topics, a question on Tokenique sections for next year. If I'm looking at, I think we have a new page 137 properly. RC 10 Tokenique. It looks like we now have 3 sections of kindergarten at Tokenique, all 3 over the break point. So are we still talking about going down a section at Tokenique?
So the section just didn't change. There was a minor typo on the page that was edited. So currently we have 4. We are going down to 3. It is at the line, which means if one student comes in, it would tip.
But doesn't this say it's over the line if all the class sizes are 22 and the break
That is the
point's
line.
21?
The break point's 22.
Oh, am I looking at
I
the
think-
old copy? No, the new copy has break point 21. Old copy was break point 22. Okay. So then I don't, okay. Thank you.
Sarah.
I just have a quick question about intramurals at each of your schools. It's my understanding that not everybody is running intramurals and at one point it used to be just Holmes. Is that still the case?
You'll come back to us with that?
I can speak to, we use intramural budget to support our unified sports program in Oxbridge. We do not have another intramural program this time.
Okay. Is Holmes still doing it, Paula?
Somebody else was talking about it.
Tokenique was talking about it. I don't know if they got it off the ground yet.
Yeah, no, we don't have it off the ground yet, but we did have interest in it originally.
Does that interest remain?
No, sorry. No, the person that was interested in teaching that class has committed to another program.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Like Luke and your colleagues, thank you so much for your thoughtful approach to the budget and looking to see where you could save money. My question is the same about robotics, except for the fact, is it open to all grades or is it just because you're elementary school, so it's a little different? Or is it just a couple of the higher grades?
Nope, there's 3 programs effectively. There's a younger, like a lower kind of robotics club, an upper robotics club, and then a competition level group. So theoretically, there could be 3 clubs running. It's hard to staff. That's the challenge right now. Many schools have one or two up and running. I don't believe any of us have the full staffing available for all three, but we're all in support of the club. We think it's a great opportunity. It's just difficult to staff right now.
Okay, so I guess my question, as with all the other schools, is are we going to be able to support every child that wants to take part in it?
We need teachers. We need coaches and teachers. That's right now the bottleneck for us.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
So I think it'd be good to see when it comes to robotics, some type of graph as to how this is all working, because it sounds like something that's just going to continue to get momentum. And I think Dave brings up a good point as to how does this tie into STEM and the curriculum. So any other questions or comments on the elementary school RCs?
The only
Dr.
thing,
Hadley?
so I'm sorry, I forgot one important addition, which is that we are requesting an additional custodian at Oxford as well.
Yes.
It's going to hit the facilities line, but I'd be remiss if I didn't.
Yep.
know. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just pointing out that the secretarial position and the lunch monitor positions are, Mr. Sheeny mentioned, are ways of actually trying to address FTEs and also trying to address the overall increase in the budgets, just trying to manage that a little bit. And there are a total of 7 lunch monitors in the actual count, 5 at the elementary school and 2 at the middle school.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all for joining us this morning. Appreciate it. Appreciate all the work building the budget. Thank you.
Thank you for your support.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Stay with us just a second, or Luke's here. So with that, we'll move over to RTM education. Ed?
Yeah, just a couple of questions. For elementary, is the cost per pupil for Oxford higher because of ELP? Can this be broken out so it's comparable to the other schools? And what are the dues and memberships at elementary for? And then one other question on substitutes, it's maybe less specific to elementary, but a comment that Mr. Forgeron made. So when you talk about how you're using the building subs and staffing the classrooms. So I understand in elementary school, it's more important maybe to have someone actually in the room. I guess when you assess the cost benefit of the cost of this additional substitute and the benefit they're going to be in the room, when you get to high school and specifically the more advanced classes like AP French or calculus or something like that, like what is the educational benefit of the substitute in that scenario compared to not having a substitute and having someone just sort of cover it? And it's, I guess, a question of how you assess that benefit compared to, let's say, at the elementary school, where to me as a non-educator, it would seem like it's a lot clearer. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. We'll move over to RTM F&B. Thanks, Jack.
The cost accountant is here. The 1/12 increase in the secretary is in fact an FTE addition of 0.83333.
Jack, just get that microphone closer. Thank you.
Well, it was for Luke. He's a little bit tall. The cost accountant says that at least for the summer month, the increase in the secretarial services should be allocated to ELP because it is specifically servicing a specific, and I don't know how we do ECR, whether or not that cost would be allocated at any shape or way into it, but if it is, then it's there. It is an increase of 0.8 FTE because even though it's existing person, we're now paying for 12 as opposed to 11. To follow up on a prior question from Tara, the request was for all clubs and participation for Middlesex. I think in the past we've had it for all of our schools, so I'm just going to put it out there for all of our schools. And while I hate to suggest to another board how they should conduct their business, but
you're going to.
yeah. I understand the conversation of SSOs and possibly using them in the lunchrooms, but I'm a little bit uncomfortable with that discussion being done in public as opposed to executive session. So can you guys just have an executive session on that and come back and say we've resolved it?
Duly
Thank
noted.
you.
Thanks, Jack. CDSP. We're good? Okay, thank you. CPAC, any of our friends online?
Ms. J.D. Sayani?
You there, Jamie?
Yep. Hi, it's Jamie again. We have several questions. The first is about the assistant principals, the new assistant principals. We'd like to know what percentage of their day is being spent on the new IEP system, CT SEDS. If we could just see a general breakdown of how the time is spent between those assistant principals, I think that would be very helpful. And along with the CT SEDS, the new system, we understand that tracking for SRBI is now going to be optional as far as integrating that into the system. So we'd like to know, and that will be coming up this year. So we'd like to know if the district is going to be participating and what the cost of the training will be, if so. Then on to DBT again. We'd like to know how many elementary psychologists have been trained in DBT and how it's being implemented at the elementary schools, how many children are included and how the groupings are arranged. And also, as looking at mental health, how crisis management is being addressed at the elementary schools. Let's see, I think I have one more here. Oh, and I have two more. As far as co-taught, we'd love to hear more about why that program's not being expanded at the elementary school.
Say that again, Jamie. You
Oh,
cut it.
the co-taught program.
Okay.
We'd like to hear more about why it's not being expanded at the elementary school if was successful. And then also along with literacy, which is what our co-taught is around at the elementary schools, we'd like to hear more about what we're doing around the science of reading and meeting those state requirements. I think it'd be great to hear an actual presentation about that. Thank you.
Jamie, we're going to take all your questions. A lot of your questions move off of specific budget items and get into more operations and programming. So Alan and I have talked about the questions that you also emailed us. There may need to be a separate CDSP meeting, which I know we have, but CPAC meeting, I'm sorry. But, just your questions go way beyond some of the budget stuff, but we'll capture them and we'll do the follow-up meetings with you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll open it up to public comment on the elementary school RCs. Anyone online? Michelle?
There are no raised hands at this
All
time.
right, good. Thank you. Thank you all for joining us this morning, all our elementary school principals. Yes.
Can I have a follow-up to?
Yeah.
Based on the questions. So just a clarification, Rich, the lunch monitors, we have 0.92 coming off.
Yep. So there are 2 lunch monitors at each school. They only work 3 hours a day, so each are at 0.46.
Okay.
So they're both coming out of the operating budget, and then 1.46 for every elementary school is going in the lunch account, plus 2.46s at middle school going into the lunch account. So that's how you get to the minus 0.92.
Okay, then from an accounting perspective, to address Jack's question, the 0.83, 1/12.
So we do not list FTEs for 10-month or 11 months as like a 0.83. So a 0.83 is 11 divided by 12 essentially.
Yeah.
So none of our FTEs are shown as like a 0.83. They're all a 1 as long as they're employed at least 10 months here. So if you were to make it a 0.83 and do that, you would have to change any 10-month and any 11-month employee to have that new ratio. That's just kind of how the process has been for the board for as long as I.
Is that common accounting practice in other districts, you think?
Some do both.
Okay.
Some do the 0.83 and some do, a whole 1.0. It's really dependent on how people like to see things.
And then just from a dollar perspective on that same line, like that same person,
So the same person, it's just
do they get an increase in salary?
they get the extra 1 year.
And that's accounted for in the budget?
Correct.
Thank you. Good. Thank you, John. So we will move on to facilities RC 12. Kevin, are you joining us online?
Yes, I am. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Kevin.
Good
Thank you
morning.
for joining us. Thank you all for attending. People are taking breaks, I'm sure. Go ahead, Kevin.
All right. So thank you for allowing me to present RC 12, the facilities budget for the upcoming fiscal year. This year, the maintenance department, like everybody else, experienced a number of cost increases, mainly driven by inflation, oil prices, and even contractual increases. Some examples of those are found in the line items for refuse, custodial supplies, and contracted cleaning services. Now, we tried to keep flat or even decrease lines wherever it was possible. Some of those decreases are due to the collective bargaining contracts, ability to take on more tasks with our in-house labor, and just overall management and maintenance methods. The net result of which basically is a 1% overall decrease to RC12 year to year. Some examples of those decreases are consultant services, plumbing supplies, etc. One area I want to highlight, Dr. Forshaw pointed out just moments ago, we do have the additional custodian at Ox Ridge. This addition had been discussed over the last couple budget cycles, and it's a critical component to our operation. Phase 2 of Ox Ridge is progressing nicely, and the ability to keep that section clean to our standards has to be met. So the Ox Ridge, even with the additional FTE, will still have the highest ratio of square foot per custodian in the district, and that's highlighted by the chart on page 148. Something that you don't see in the budget but is highlighted in the narrative is an item that was brought up last year at the same time, which is an additional grounds worker. As the summary explains, our schools are going through a bit of a rebirth, and with all new landscape designs on 4 out of the 7 campuses, the amount of work needed to maintain those beautiful new construction projects is going to be increasingly difficult with our current staffing levels. So I just wanted to highlight that today. And with that, I'll turn it over to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Kevin. Dennis.
Yes, in the narrative, there's a phrase in here that says there's a realization and now all FTE requests can make it to the board for approval. I would like a little more clarification as to what that means. Does that mean that things get denied from the board, or does that mean we're going to go around the board and approve FTEs?
No, we're not going around the board to approve FTEs. Absolutely.
That's the way I read said quote.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I think Kevin points out that we had talked about a groundskeeper and so on. That has come up in previous budgets. He spoke to it directly here, the need for those positions.
It means it didn't make it past the superintendent.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for that clarity.
There's a lot of stuff moved up through the process, Dennis.
Okay,
It doesn't get to the table. So,
Okay, thank you.
but good point. Jill.
On the subject of Hanley Homes and Royal, I have 2 comments. One is just a correction for the narrative. I'm sure this was produced before we finished, but where it says under homes, we're not doing a pond. So just in case that causes, we're going to do an underground tank.
We're not doing
a pond. So we'll talk about that on the 10th when we show you the design, but because it's in the book, I just wanted to note it. It's page 148 under homes. But Kevin, I have a question for you. I know most of what's inside of maintenance is, day to day and wouldn't necessarily be impacted by a large by a large capital project. And we talked about the fact that our capital needs are a little lower, but I wanted to know whether the either upcoming HHR project has had any impact on your maintenance budget. I would assume no, but I just wanted to double check it so that we can be thinking about years coming forward if there has been any impact.
Yeah, the short answer is no at this time, but we are definitely aware of the projects that are coming and how they may impact the budget in the future, but not at this time.
Thank you.
So Kevin, if I could push back a little on the incredible job you and your team do. And you're the professional here, but looking at the ratio of square footage and custodians, and I'm a big proponent of getting you all what you need, but with a brand new, very clean, organized, efficient school, do you really need to go up to that many custodians in that school?
So yes, to have the entire ELP program with all the difficulties that come with cleaning up after youngsters, plus the fact that building we anticipated to be heavily used every evening for after school activities, it's going to be a very large ask of just the bodies that we have.
Fair enough. I appreciate that, Kevin.
You're welcome.
Good points. Julie?
Thank you. Thanks for all the info that was in here. I appreciated all the detail. I see that the item for reserve for emergency repairs, you're going down quite a bit, and it looks like it fluctuates quite a bit over the years. I would imagine it's hard to plan for unanticipated emergencies. So I just wanted to confirm that you're comfortable with that. I assume you are, and probably trust that if you found yourself in a position where you needed more, you would know you could ask for it.
That's exactly right. We try to mitigate emergencies as much as possible, but we would-
Excellent. So with that kind of same thinking, talk to me about snow removal. How do you come up with that number?
So that is based off of previous years with our, whether it's the usage or the number of hours that we spend removing snow. And obviously we can't predict the weather. So we just kind of use that set of data to try and derive the budget that you have before you.
Okay, thank you.
And if you ever go into pending snowstorms, Julie, we'd be
Got my
happy to
almanac
get
in my
it.
back pocket. and-
It's a tough one. It's a question that someone asks every year. So,
How's February break looking?
yeah, it's very quick, Sarah.
Thank you. I'm gonna go back to my 101012100 improvement of sites. Is that also porta potties in this RC? And if so, $40,000 seems like a lot of money to spend on porta potties.
It is not porta potty.
Okay, all right. So what does that mean? What is 12100? What is 122000 improvement of buildings? And related, how is that different from 72016, which I think is the general maintenance line?
So improvement of buildings can be anything from having to replace blinds that are tattered or not working. Improvement of sites can be anything that's typically outside the building.
Okay.
Needs to be taken care of. It's not your typical like care of grounds where it's like mowing and mulching
Okay.
and something like that.
Okay. And then 72016, how is that different than improvement in buildings? The classrooms, corridors, auditorium, what is that?
So classroom corridors are all inside. It could be a repair of like a basketball hoop.
Okay. all right,
It could
that
be
makes
anything
sense.
like that.
Okay.
So Kevin, just a little follow up on Sarah, improvement of sites, improvement of buildings. I've done my own little facility tours on a regular basis, and I don't know, sent probably close to 100 pictures to you and Dr. Adley. I get concerned with seeing those line items flat. We've got at one estimate, $500 million worth of real estate. We've got 200 acres. I visually see ongoing maintenance that needs to be done on some of these buildings. Some of it goes back a couple of years. If you look at the back of the high school, there's scuppers that I was told were going to be put in 2 years ago that were not. There's molds, there's rot on the back of that high school. There's deterioration of the brick and the coping. I could go on and on and on. I guess I'm a little bit of a facilities geek, but just with that, I would really appreciate making sure you have what you need in here, because we're investing literally $150 million into infrastructure in the schools, but we cannot take away from the maintenance of that high school or the maintenance of Tokenique or the maintenance of the middle school. So I just put that in your thought process as we go forward. I've never known this board and its various configurations over the 9 years that I've been here not fund what we need from a facility and a building standpoint. So while I loved Mike Lynch and Mr. MacGyver, AKA, but we need to maintain these buildings. All right.
Very good.
Katie.
Thank you. It's a question for either you, Kevin or Rich. I'm not sure where this would apply. But in terms of looking forward to our buildings, to your point, Duke, about maintenance and long-term planning, where would a feasibility study belong? Would that be in this, or would that be a capital project?
It would be an operating expense.
Okay, it would be. So are there plans to, in looking through the capital projects and looking through the maintenance needs going forward, are there plans to do a feasibility study for the middle school?
So there's actually a new state law that requires districts now to do feasibility studies every certain amount of years. So it's likely that not in this budget, but in the fiscal 25 budget, you're going to see a request for a feasibility study. I think if it's looking at the middle school particularly, and I don't want to speak for Kevin, I think that your chance to target the middle school is going to be once the HHR buildings are done. To be able to do the middle school while you're doing 3 buildings and really technically 4, because Oxford isn't really quite done yet, is too much to handle. So I think as you get closer to that end point of HHR being complete, that's when you're going to start looking at the middle school, and primarily a new roof is going to be one of the things that you're going to want to look at. And then at that point, it's going to be the only school without central air. And that might be one item that you want to look at post HHR.
I appreciate that. And just to clarify, your comments about, sort of how many projects we have on our plate at one time. The time that it takes to conduct a study to kind of get approvals, and that is not small either. So can we afford to wait another year to even have that discussion about its appropriateness? I mean, to Duke's point about things that we just kind of see and hear anecdotally, I'm hearing about staff members and offices and closets and leaking roofs and stuff in the middle school. Does it make sense? Can we wait a year to even discuss a feasibility study at the middle school?
So it's a good question, Katie, having been on this board a long time. We're still, I think, playing off the master plan, which was done, which is probably going on 6, 7, or 8 years, which gave a lot of good detail. The good news is, in all the folks that have been in and out of these schools in terms of architects and contractors with everything that we have going on, library redesign, security, audits and stuff like that, we consistently get a feedback of how well maintained our buildings are. Yeah, there's leaky roofs and all that type of stuff, but Mike and now Kevin has been on it. And I just, it's a broader conversation about just general upkeep and maintenance. So I would go back to Kevin. Kevin, you don't have to answer us now, but it's a good question as to if there's a point in time. And then the big question around it is, what is the cost associated with it? Because there is a lead time to it, but I'll leave it at that, if that makes sense. Julie.
I know I asked this last year, but I'm worried that we have unrealized revenue potential with our facilities usage. Our rates are considerably lower than our neighbors. We're hundreds of dollars below neighboring towns for gym rentals, et cetera. And especially as our facilities are getting better and better. And there's more potential to share them with others, and perhaps create a stronger revenue stream. I'd really like us to look at that moving forward.
Good.
Just build off of that. So what struck
Okay,
me in
Sarah.
particular, sorry, was the auditorium, because that is much lower than Westport and Greenwich. And if we're improving the auditorium significantly, that I think is a very large opportunity for some big increases there.
Thank you. Dennis.
And to build on rentals as well, my question is on account 10-2008 building rentals, where we're going down $30,000 due to the construction at Henley Homes and Royal. Does that impact our contract with the YMCA?
No, they will just be at a different location.
Good question. Thank you, Dennis. David.
Just following up on that, my question would be if we're underpriced relative to our peers and we're not getting the same sort of traffic, then maybe pricing isn't the issue, and maybe something else. So just wondering what could be contributing to that.
Well, I think the thing we just have to come to realization at is that there may be some limitations over the next couple of years with these schools, right?
So that's the biggest issue. One of the reasons you see revenue down for next budget is the fact that we have 3 buildings that'll be offline. So we're going to lose a little bit of revenue there. The hope is once those buildings come back online, then you're going to see that swing back up.
Yep. Good. Julie.
To follow up on that, I don't know if we know that our neighbors are getting more traffic than we are. You may know that, Rich, but maybe we could look at how much usage our facilities are getting and start from there. It may not be price related at all.
I mean, we can certainly check the DERG. I know just compared to some of the other districts that we have, we do generate significantly more than some of our surrounding peers like Ridgefield and Weston, for example.
Dollars or volume?
Dollars.
Good. John.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to, I guess it's a broader thing. We typically don't adjust budgets for revenues, but it sounds like there might be some opportunities for this board to up some revenues. Again, that's going to be small dollars in the grand scheme of it, but
we should be in line with the market.
I'd love to, Rich, if there's any way you could map out what a reasonable increase to get us more in line with the average would bring us some revenue. So we had a dollar amount that we could propose when we go through ads cuts. That'd be great.
Good. Jill.
I have two questions. One is to the board. We usually look at this number and set it in the spring. So do we want to, do we want to look at it closely now in the middle of budget season? Or do we want to look at it in the spring and reset it
Yes,
in the
thank you.
spring?
Next question.
Okay, we're looking at it now. And then Kevin, next question for you. I appreciate the, it has to do with Oxford, but looking at the square footage and the custodian ratio, how we run it with the new numbers for Hinley Homes and Royal. Are we looking at potentially increasing any custodians in those buildings based on, I know they're not huge increase in size, but I think it would, if we haven't, it would be valuable to run it just so we can see what we've got coming down the pike.
Yeah, we can certainly run those numbers.
I think that, you know what, it's a great question, Jill, it plays into Dennis and everything. That's where we've got to do a better job from a forecasting standpoint. I mean, there's probably going to be a need on those schools. So,
Sorry.
good question. Go ahead, John.
Do we have a comparison on fields too?
We can certainly do that. I mean, I will say fields here, the rentals are much greater than they are in buildings. Part of that is because the beautiful fields you have at Tarian High School.
Yeah.
And we definitely generate more in fields specifically than we do our peers, but we can pull information.
Hourly rates is kind of what I'm looking at. I think that was it. Oh, the Y contract. Where do we stand on that? Like, is it a 3-year contract?
So it's every year it comes up for renewal. This is the second year. Everything's been working out really, really well. The Y is happy, we're happy. So we would bring that forward as a recommendation later in the school year.
Okay.
For a renewal for next year.
Okay,
Good
so
stuff.
that will handle separately.
Yeah, good. Thank you, John. No, thanks for bringing it up. Good. Are we good on facilities? Kevin, we're 100% in terms of all those truck replacements from the flood. You've got another truck you're replacing. You're in good shape there from an equipment standpoint.
From an equipment standpoint, yes, and when we get to the capital, we'll talk about the leaf blower and the new truck.
Good stuff. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So if we're good on, we will move to Board of Finance questions, RTM education. Ed, you're good on facilities. Jack, RTM, F and B.
Quickly, I agree with the review of the revenues. I am interested in who we're renting to in town versus out of town, especially in the auditorium, because that's where some of the fees would be. So is a Darien organization that we're renting to? Also, should there be a difference in renting the artificial fields versus the natural grass? Just out for a conversation. Question on the equipment. So we have HHR that over the next couple of years are going to be having replacements there for equipment and furniture in there. We've just brought on or bringing on Ox Ridge, which had equipment and that embedded into that construction project. So it really leaves 3 schools, Tokenique, Middlesex, and the high school, and yet the cost of $45,000 is consistent. I would hate to think that we're using this line item to do new equipment that ultimately for HHR could possibly be allocated to the HHR budget. I know that creates some accounting, but the fact of the matter is you're going to want the same equipment that you're going to be putting in. So if you need new furniture and
Jack, could I just
that's
ask
there.
which line, are you 73001? What are you referencing?
Without my glasses, but yeah, 73001.
Okay.
All right, so that's my question. It's been running at one thing, but since we're putting in new stuff in 3 of our schools, we just brought another one online. I'm questioning whether or not that's an appropriate number for that
Any
line.
quick answer there, Rich?
So a lot of it is a small replacement cycle for furniture at the high school.
Okay.
Okay.
The other thing to know, though, is that HHR is not replacing the furniture in existing classrooms. We are adding furniture to new classrooms, but we're not part of the overall replacement cycle. So you wouldn't see a decline in those numbers based on the work we're doing
So we're adding furniture.
to the new spaces,
Right.
the library.
So we still have our consistent furniture recycle program.
That's part of the question, detail.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good. Thank you, Jack.
No, it'll come up.
CDSP. You.
Deborah Ritchie, CDSP. Just one quick question on the reserve for emergency repairs. You're decreasing it in the budget from 115,000 to 45,000. It was originally budgeted as at 45,000 this year, and you made a transfer of 70,000. So we'd love to have a more detailed explanation of, it does seem to historically trend higher than 45,000. So could we just have a more detailed explanation of where you think you can achieve those cost savings? Thanks.
Is that a one-off? Rich?
Yeah,
So we rented a temporary fire pump this year because the fire pump in the capital budget didn't arrive in time.
Okay.
So we're taking out the money because we're not going to be renting the temporary.
Yeah, we
fire pump.
covered that in finance a few months ago.
Yeah. Perfect. Good. Thank you. CPAC. Are we good?
We have nothing, thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you so much. Any public comment with respect to facilities RC12? All right, good. Thank you all. We'll move on to capital projects. Kevin?
All right, so obviously we touched on the major capital construction projects that are happening. So the capital budget in front of you is largely focused on the high school and the middle school. First item up at the high school is the need for additional security cameras. This is to mitigate blind spots and increase coverage around the building, interior and exterior. Second is the variable air volume boxes and plumbing valves that are kind of hidden throughout the building. The VAVs, they're mechanical components that help control the flow of air and the water to help heat and cool specific rooms. Many of these were designed to be buried in walls, and it makes it very difficult to service and maintain them, especially in an emergency situation. So this project will allow us to have better access and help mitigate downtime. The third project at the high school is the audio-visual upgrades of the theater. There's a packet in the back of the capital budget book that highlights the changes that are needed to update the AV components. And that project allows the performing arts to have a more robust experience within the theater. Moving over to Middlesex, the gym wall padding, it's cracked, peeling, faded, and it's not just aesthetics, but also safety concern. So we're calling for the replacement of the wall padding in both gyms at the middle school. Next on the list is the masonry ceiling of the north facade. This is the 1940 section of the school. We started last summer renovating and restoring the south and the east facades, which was a large success. This basically closes the loop on that section of the building. And then lastly, for the middle school are the fire alarm visual strobes. These are very old, very difficult to find replacements for, and helps protect the fire alarm system itself. And as far as the district-wide is concerned, we touched on it briefly. The ride-on leaf blower and the replacement truck cycle, those vehicles are used day in, day out, and much needed in order to help our staff get their tasks completed.
Jill, we lost her chair.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were going to keep going to him.
No, I think
He
it's
just
good.
said, I didn't hear what he said. I was writing notes. Okay, any questions from the board? Sorry. Mr. John.
You got to work on this. All joking aside, Kevin, is the ride-on, like, are there any is there any machinery that enhances the productivity? I mean, I can imagine a ride-on versus a push blower is worlds better, but like, I guess I'm getting at, do we not own certain equipment that could vastly enhance productivity?
Well, I think to your point, that's exactly what this request does. It allows us to have 2 ride-on leaf blowers so we could deploy our existing ground crew in 2 different directions so that we don't have to, wait for the equipment to be readily available. We're going to get more use out of the staff with this additional equipment.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Julie.
Thank you. I have a number of questions on the auditorium upgrades. That's kind of a big item. I don't know if that's something we want to have a bigger discussion on. So I just want to say that before I launched with my questions. Shall I
Are there
launch?
questions you feel we could answer if you just email them into us?
Well, it's more information that I'd like as we move forward considering this.
Okay.
So for example, I would like to understand in general how these improvements will affect students' abilities to use and experience the auditorium and what they're doing. It sounds like there's a lot of complexity in the existing systems. I don't know if more kids have opportunities to actually be involved if we simplify a lot of what's going on. For example,
So do you want to speak to that? And maybe
I
you
can, yes. Hi, Colleen Thompson, Director of Music.
Thanks.
Sure. So that was a big factor in producing this proposal. So currently, a lot of the systems that we have are outdated, not usable, and so complex that to train students to use them or to train faculty to use them would not be super effective. So this will absolutely increase our ability to have students train on this type of equipment, and this is the type of equipment that they would use out in the real world. For every performer on stage, there's dozens of people backstage, and that's a huge part of what we train our students to do in the performing arts. So this will absolutely increase our ability to get students in classes. We have a music technology class, and we have a robust theater program and a theater tech program that we would absolutely get students more involved with these upgrades.
Does that help a little, Julie?
yeah,
Okay.
I have more, but I'll wait.
Yeah, okay, good. No, thank you, David.
Yeah, just kind of following up on that. I mean, I think a complex tech situation would be a good STEM learning opportunity for people to figure out. But I think more importantly, when I look at the anticipated spend over the next years for the library renovations we have, that's consistent with our Libraries Reimagined initiative. Are we doing anything in terms of health, safety, security that's being obtained by doing this spend in the auditorium? Or, is it just simply ease of use? I mean, if we can tie this back to something, I'd be curious to what that is.
Colleen, is it safe to say most of the stuff that's up there is original to that high school?
It is, yes.
So it's how old is that?
Jeff, I think Jeff can speak to that too.
Say that again?
The auditorium. Yeah, 2004. And, it just came to light when, I was in a unique position that I didn't get to see a production in our auditorium until a year after I started, because I started during COVID. And, in working with stakeholders and working with the teachers, it became apparent that a lot of the equipment we have there has not been upgraded since it was built in 2004. So it's time.
Okay. Dennis.
Yeah, and with that, so the lighting is being thought of doing in a second year project and breaking this up into two. And I guess my question is, how expensive, because it says here they consume a tremendous amount of power, require frequent changes. And my thought is, if we're going to do this, do it all at once, finish it. I understand it's more money, but if you're taking the auditorium offline, you may as well get the LED lights, begin to recoup that savings immediately, and not wait a year to do it and then have to shut the auditorium down for another year to replace the LED lights.
This, I'm assuming, Rich, is a summer project. Once all the stuff is ordered, it's about installation. There's not a lot of construction
It
here.
is one of the reasons it's separated into 2 years is if we were to do it all at once, you likely are going to spill it to the fall and have to close that auditorium for a long period of time.
Okay. So I think, but going back to Dave's comment, is this ties into the theater program, it ties into audiovisual curriculum type things. Does it tie into, is there anything we do or work with Channel 79 in terms of our students and this type of equipment? I know a lot of stuff is broadcast from up at the high school through Channel 79. And then I can't think of the name, John, but the DAF media, like how does it all tie together? And is there a partnership there that we could work with on some of this stuff?
I know
you don't have to answer it
Sure.
now, but just some food for
Jeff
thought.
is right here.
Yeah, Jeff is here too.
Jeff is here.
So yeah, it will tie in regards to we'll be able to stream every event that's in the auditorium.
Okay.
So with with or without, sometimes there's conflicts with DAF doing a sporting event and it can't cover a concert or a Board of Ed meeting that moves there. So pretty much this will ensure that every event gets streamed because the video portion will be upgraded as well.
I trust Colleen thoroughly, but in your professional opinion, having manned our booth for so many years here, what's your thought on this type of investment up there? I see you up there at every performance.
Yeah, it's time. I haven't asked, since we started at the new school, which isn't new anymore, but with the intention of the bones have always been good, but the kind of the guts of it and behind the scenes, we've had some shortcomings even since we moved into that building, but we made it all work. And now kind of with everything with technology, it's time.
All right, John.
While you're up there, I mean, I see you training, students
Yeah,
up there. I mean, how do you see the training going with the new equipment?
Yeah, I think one thing with the tech gear overall, it's just become so much more friendlier. And that's, I think, the key. And so I think it's just going to be, it's kind of getting the word out to the students is kind of the hard part. And then once they find out that they can go behind the scenes and be part of it, I think this is just going to increase that. Absolutely.
And so just tying this back to $1 million investment up there leads to how much we can increase our revenues on renting that space out. But does that, all that stuff is accessible to folks that come in and rent that auditorium?
Yeah,
with
100%.
your
Yeah.
supervision or guidance? Or
Correct. 100%. It's available for all the rentals as well.
Okay. Sarah.
Just building on that, is currently, are people not renting our spaces because it's antiquated, or would this increase, people coming in to rent our space?
It's possible. It's a hard question to answer. Sometimes the people honestly just want the space, because one of the things that we have is a great stage space that no one has, with fly space up top where you can fly things and stuff. So sometimes it's just the space that dictates that, and maybe not the technology, but I think the streaming aspect would probably be a huge factor in rental.
That's a good point. Jill.
Jeff, I think you alluded to this, but there were a couple of things that were value engineered near the end of the build of the high school, and one of them was the auditorium. So I think part of what's happened is that we went to a bare bones solution at that time, and we're looking to bring this up to speed. I'm in full support of this, given the amount of time that the auditorium is used, whether it's for music, theater, graduations, community partners. I think this is an important set of work to just finish that space. That said, I do think if there's an opportunity for any community partners to come on board and be part of it, I think that's a worthwhile discussion.
I think to get us to where we want to be, state of art, there's preliminary conversations about the booth out at the field. I don't know if we can tie it into what your needs may be here too, but and then tie it into our community partners. I think it's a worthwhile discussion. Julie.
Thank you. I was just going to add, as we move forward, if we could get a better understanding what some of these pieces are, as we maybe need to evaluate what are the need to haves and what are the nice to haves. Like the confidence monitor sounds amazing, but I'm not sure that I can fully appreciate it just yet. And also what any potential offsets are. I know currently we're using a lot of rental equipment. We have inefficient power usage. We might have reduced maintenance, I would hope, with all of this. So if we could try to wrap our heads around where we would get savings out of this as well, would be super helpful.
Good. Thank you. Everyone good? We good on anything else on capital? So Colleen, anything else?
No, I
Thank
think,
you.
I think
Thank you
those
for being
questions were
here.
answered. Sure.
Jeff, you're always here, but thank you. Okay. All right, good. So Kevin, we'll keep moving. I hear stomachs grumbling, but we'll keep moving quickly through the next two. Fixed expenses, Kevin? I'm sorry. Trying to keep things moving. RTM education, Ed, sure. Step up, please. Thank you.
Thanks. I think just a comment or suggestion I would make, I've made it before, but when you talk about community partners, and that's great, but we should remember, I know we're a public institution, University of Connecticut offers naming rights for donations to fund its campus improvements. This is a very large project, and if a community partner wants to support it, that's great, but I think we should be a little bit more open-minded because we're talking about $1 million. Thank you.
Understood. Thanks, Ed. Jack.
Because we're talking about capital, I think it's important that you understand part of how the RTM F&B will be looking at budgets this year, not only for the Board of Ed, but the Board of Selectmen. when we run overages and those funds go back into the general fund, the only thing that the general fund can be used for is to purchase capital. So that's part of the reason why we're going to be looking and saying, you know what? We'd prefer you not to be running overages. And if you need money, come back to us, because capital needs, giving it back in theory to the taxpayers the next years, we can't use that money for operations. So you're going to hear something later when we get into the technology that I'm going to be proposing. But that's part of it. If I'm looking at you, you guys are very low for capital this year. If we're running the same type of thing on the Board of Selectmen side, I'm going to tell you that my anticipated refunds coming back from the Board of Selectmen in your budget will be greater than the capital requests going into this year's budget, which means that's not good. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. CDSP. Anything on facilities? You guys good? Thank you. CPAC?
Nothing, thank you.
Good, thank you. Any public comments with respect to facilities capital? We good? All right, good. Thank you all. Public comment? Did they say that? Fixed expenses, Kevin, RC 25.
So I'll take it for Kevin. So there are really three primary drivers to the RC 25 fixed. It's health insurance, it's utility costs, and transportation. So as most people have seen their own utility costs rise, we're no different. We were very fortunate in the current year to lock in heating oil at $2.30 a gallon, well below market rate. Next year, our rates will be at $3.45 per gallon, and then which will add about $63,000 to the budget. Additionally, natural gas prices have risen almost 25%. That's going to add another $84,000. And then obviously with Oxbridge coming online, the building will be bigger, and there'll be more heating costs there. We were fortunate in one area of utilities. The town did lock in a supply rate with Constellation at just about 8 cents per kilowatt hour, which is well below market rate. And so we're not seeing a significant increase there. We did talk about this at Finance Committee. Aquarian is raising rates in excess of 10% next year. And so that is adding about $15,000 to the water account. And then diesel fuel, which affects our transportation and our buses. Again, we were very lucky to lock in this year at $2.30 per gallon, which is well below rates. For next year, it's going to be $3.52. So that's adding about $80,000 to the budget. The big driver, more so than anything in fixed, is health insurance. We are very, very lucky that we locked in a not to exceed rate of 7% for next year, given our claim history. If we look at our claim history, we have 26 claims that have exceeded $100,000. We have 9 claims that have exceeded $250,000. And we have 4 claims that have exceeded $500,000, including 1 claim that's exceeded $3 million. So given that, we were actually running at 140% loss ratio, which means for every dollar we're giving Anthem, they're spending $1.40. So if you were to go to market, they're going to want to recoup that money. So we're lucky that we have this rate lock in place. We do not have a rate lock for fiscal 25, so not the budget you're looking at now, but the year after. So we will have to look at what our options are available. I know some people have talked about, should we go self-insured? Is that a model? So we did look at self-insured. That would be about $3 million more than you're looking at currently in this budget. Part of the issue for that is anytime you're self-insured, you have to purchase what's called stop loss insurance. And so typically what you buy is individual stop loss insurance. So that means you're paying up to, let's say, the first $250,000 on a claim, and then you have insurance that picks up after that. That alone would cost us $2 million given our high claimants. And so it's just not really a time to go to a self-insured model. Another option down the road could potentially be the state plan. However, the state plan, you have to make a 3-year commitment. You have absolutely no control over what those rates will or will not be. And if we look at some of our neighboring districts, they've actually left the state plan. Westport recently left the state plan. Weston has left the state plan. Trumbull, I believe, has left the state plan. And part of that is their rate setting doesn't actually coincide with your budget calendar. And so what will end up happening is you get guidance of, let's say, a 10% increase, and then they surprise you with a 14 or 15% increase. So that's not a great option either, but that right now is not going to affect our budget for fiscal 24. That will be a fiscal 25 issue. And then in terms of
just to pause there on the insurance, you had mentioned a 40% increase potential down the road, but how does that play into the $5 million it would cost us to self-insure?
Sure. So the 40% increase would be if we did not have a rate cap and we went to market today,
Okay.
we would be looking at a 40% rate hike. If we went self-insured, you'd be looking at 3 million. So a 40% rate hike is probably a $4 or $5 million increase
Okay.
from where we're at. Self-insured model would be a little over $3 million. So you're not that far off, but maybe a little bit better. But health insurance is certainly an issue, and really what's driving Darien-Ann's claims primarily more than anything is we have a small group of small population that have very serious illnesses that are driving up costs. So it's not like we need a wellness component to make people healthier. We just unfortunately have a lot of individuals with primarily cancer claims, and that doesn't necessarily mean the employee. It could be an employee's spouse or child, whatever it might be. But that's really what's driving it. And health insurance does tend to be cyclical. Usually people are hit with 4 or 5 years of really bad claims, and then it kind of cycles back down where you have really good claims. So if you look back, 5 years ago, Darien was very lucky and had very modest health insurance increases. And now we're in that period of time where our health insurance increases are quite bad. If we look at a neighboring community like Ridgefield, they have incredible health claims right now where their health claims are very low. But 5 years ago, when we were down, they were really, really up. And so it tends to be very cyclical. So then the other item we did want to highlight is transportation. This will be the last year of the contract with First Student. There is a nationwide driver shortages throughout the state of Connecticut. And as a result, wages for drivers have been going up. They've been trying to offer sign-on bonuses. And so when you do things like that, that ends up getting passed off to the consumer. In this case, we are the consumer. So districts who have gone out to bid this year have seen increases anywhere of 10 to 20%. One of the things that will work against us next year when we go out to bid is we do not have a bus depot. So the number of bus companies who are willing to bid in Darien is pretty limited. You're pretty much stuck with whoever Stanford has as a provider, which is First Student. So the last time the district went out to bid, it got one bid, and that was First Student.
And so just so everyone listening understands that the issue there, or the challenges there, we would probably never buy our own buses, although maybe at some point you should explain that to everyone. But the issue is from a lease standpoint, working with First Student, we have no place to put the buses in town.
Correct. So when you have a bus contract, they need two things. They need one place to park the buses, and they need a place to maintain the buses. So a garage, place where the mechanics can work on the buses. So even if we had a bus depot here, it doesn't mean that when you put it out to bid, you wouldn't see that 10 or 20% increase. You probably would, given the nationwide driver shortage. What it would do is provide more competition. Instead of getting one vendor to bid, you might get 3 or 4 vendors to bid. That's the one thing that works against us without having a bus depot. Transportation costs are something that are districts across the state are struggling. I know in the community I live in, you get text messages saying that, this bus is not picking up your kids today, driving to school, because we don't have a bus driver. So we're very lucky we're not in that situation. Part of what's caused this was COVID. So when COVID happened and school shut down, bus drivers lost their job. And so they went to go look for something else. And now there's just not a lot of drivers.
So Rich, aside from, we have our usual challenges when we kick off the year, bus routes, and we work through all of that. And, but just from you managing this day to day, are you happy with the overall service that we get from First Student? And I know we've got a new transportation director on board. So in terms of, Dave always does a good job of saying, did we go out to bid? Did we get 3 bids? I mean, it sounds like we could be sitting here with one bid next year again. And you're happy with the service and the relationship we have with them?
Well, we did fire the location manager twice. So in the beginning of the year, not so much.
Okay.
But it's gotten much better, I would say, in the last month or two.
Good. All right. Go ahead, are you done? Okay, good. John.
I was chuckling to myself. I'm like, wow, we got a big island. We could put a bus depot on it.
Let's move on to the next question.
No, but it's sparked, and we don't have it. But it sparked the thought process. There are some commercial buildings that have not been used in many years. When was the last time we even looked at a feasibility? I don't want to even study, but like search of whether or not there's a property that we could commandeer almost or rent.
But to that point, so we probably couldn't necessarily have a maintenance shop, but if we had a place to park the buses in town, does that help?
You need to be able to work on the buses at the same time.
You need a mechanic shop also. Okay. It's good to understand that, but it's
Yeah,
a good
no.
question. So,
And what are the bus contracts typically? 3 years, you said?
5 years.
So 5 years.
that's pretty standard.
Yes.
Okay.
Are we-
Dennis.
When we, if I recall, we also do purchasing agreements with other districts and towns to purchase supplies. Have we ever looked into joining a consortium to have bus service? Is that even feasible?
So for special education out of district transportation, we do try to do ride shares. And that's like you might make an agreement with Stanford or Norwalk, for example, if you have students who are going to a same outplaced facility and then you share the costs. There typically aren't like consortiums for home to school buses because they're all using the buses effectively at the same time of the day.
Good question. Rich, I throw this out there not for any discussion, but a thought process on the whole conversation around sports and transportation. Is there any value from an efficiency standpoint from all these challenges of us looking at vans for our sports teams like we've done with the Suburbans?
Sure.
I mean, you've been very successful with the Suburban program.
Sure. So I know there was a comment before, could we use the Suburbans for athletics? Unfortunately, we can't because they're driving high school kids, middle school kids and elementary
Yeah.
kids, so they're not available. The issue would be having a driver available just for athletics. And so unlike the Suburban program where you can have them drive in the morning, you can have them drive multiple tiers and then again in the afternoon. If it's a van just for athletics, you would really only have them employed for like an hour or two a day. And those are typically difficult employees to find.
Because they still have to have all the credentials.
Correct. And we couldn't flex an existing Suburban driver because they're already driving.
Okay, good. Okay, any other thoughts or questions for Rich? Fixed expenses? All right. We will go to Ed. Anything from your end? Jack, you good? CDSP?
Okay. Deborah Ritchie, CDSP, for fixed expenses. One of the questions was, since the contract for busing ends, can we revisit the current bus radius? And building on your conversation about parking buses in town, have we had discussions with the town regarding any possible locations so we can help decrease costs or increase competitiveness of the bids? And how much would we save if we were able to bring the buses in district and park them here? It sounds like we'd have to hire someone to do.
But I think that was,
repairs.
we could only park them here if we have a maintenance shop for them.
Right,
So
so I'm
that's-
just curious if we had that in place, what cost savings could be achieved? And then could coaches be used to drive possible athletic vans? Some schools use this model and have coaches get all the certifications that they need to provide that transportation. Thanks.
Thanks, Deb. CPAC, anything?
Nothing, thank you.
Thank you. Any public comment with respect to RC 25 fixed expenses? Anyone in-house? Anyone online? Michelle pass out from hunger? All right, I think we'll try and go through, well, Colleen is here, go through music, RC 13. Thank you.
Okay, good. Good.
So I will compliment you on all the concerts I have attended and how well they are. And it's just so good to have all that back and all those
Yes.
folks participating. But, you know, kudos to you and your team for what you've executed from a music standpoint now that we're able to get back together. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to the board and to the district for all of your support for music. And thank you to the PTOs and to Music for Youth for your support on our enrichment programs as well. So our music department in Darien is comprehensive, standards-based, and all students in ELP through grade 8 receive twice weekly or twice every 6 days a music class. Additionally, we offer electives in strings, band, and chorus. And we also offer electives at the high school for performing ensembles and also classes like music theory, music technology, and we're looking forward to offering guitar ensemble as a new course for DHS students. So if it's okay, I was going to just go through the line items that have some specific things to explain, and then I'm happy to.
I would just
take
hit the high
questions.
points, knowing we've all read through all of this.
Sure.
So, but that would be great. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I would say account 24005, general teaching supplies. This is where we have the increased cost for guitar ensemble, our new class. So students will have the option to bring a guitar, but we thought it best to provide guitars to all students who enroll in the class. So this cost will supply guitars, wall mounts, and replacement strings for the new class. And you'll see that I was able to find some savings in that account to offset it. So the increase is not precipitous. Look over, I wanted to explain a little in account number 250.26, dues and memberships. This is our account for any dues and memberships that are necessary for me as the director or for our teachers to provide students with opportunities such as the Western Regional Festival or the All-State Festival that's sponsored by the Connecticut Music Education Association. And what has come to light in the last few years is that our teachers are required to pay $134 in memberships to NAFME in order for our students to participate in these festivals. And the festivals do provide them with a really high level experience to collaborate with other students. For example, this year we have 18 students who are accepted to Western Regionals at the high school level, 26 students who were accepted, that's 26 from MMS, which is a really high number. And so this gives students an opportunity to audition and basically compete against, but then perform with their colleagues in different districts. So we think it's important that we provide those memberships for the teachers who send students to those festivals. So that is accounting for the increase in that line. There's another small increase in account 72045, our piano tuning budget. And quite frankly, our piano tuning costs increased by $10 per tuning. So that accounts for that cost. And I think that really accounts for most of the changes in this year's budget
Good. Thank you.
in the past. Any questions?
Board questions, thoughts? Sarah?
Thank you. Last year, I tried to add uniforms, the
Yes.
music uniforms into the budget. I don't see them again this year. Is there a reason why you left them out? Is that still a need that parents are required to pay for those uniforms?
Well, we actually decided as a department to change those requirements. So rather than students being required to buy a specific uniform, we're moving to a model where students at the high school level just simply wear long black. And we did some research on districts around us. And also, if you participate in music at the collegiate level or even the professional level, that's typically the outfit is long black. And so what we're going to start doing at the beginning of the year is simply providing students and parents with just some guidelines of what they could wear, but essentially they could wear a pantsuit like I'm wearing right now with a black shirt, and the students will look beautiful on stage. And so I think that will eliminate a lot of those challenges.
Great. And boys tux is not required?
No, we're actually going to move to a model where boys wear blazers and black shirts as well. This also kind of creates a less binary experience so that we've got, one gender wearing all black, another gender wearing black and white. It just will streamline everything for everyone.
Great. Thanks for that explanation.
Sure.
Thanks. Good. From a board perspective, good. Where did RTM Ed go? We'll go to RTM F and B.
The first one.
Combo.
Casey is now filling in for Ed online, so Casey, if you have any questions, raise your hand.
No questions.
Thanks,
Okay,
Casey.
thank you.
Thanks, Jack. You're good, Jack?
I'm good.
CDSP, you're good. CPAC, are we good?
No questions.
Thank you. Any public comment? All right, good. We will follow through on one more before we break for lunch. We've got Jacqueline here on art.
Jacqueline, thank you for coming in. Thank you.
Of course. Good
Yeah,
morning.
thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you to the board and to the town for their continued support of our visual arts program. We've got a few more weeks where our UCBC show will be up. So if you haven't seen that yet, please try to stop over
Fantastic.
and put a date on your calendar for Tuesday, May 16th is our DHS art show, end of the year art show. That'll be in the cafeteria. So save the date for that for us. We have a very similar budget from previous years. So I'll just highlight my one significant change is we're asking for 5 new wheels for the high school. So 12 of our wheels that we currently have are original to the school building. And we're just we've maintained them, we've repaired them, but just hoping that we can update and get 5 new wheels for the different classrooms. We have 28 classes that are clay-based and 26 of them use the wheels. So they're used every period of the day, all year long. Other than that, there's no significant changes from last year's budget.
I'm not sure I would go for that based on the amount of clay I have in my kitchen. and
It's used
The amount of shelves I've had to.
all day long, every period of the day, and it's very heavy. Yes.
It's good stuff.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. Good stuff. John.
Does the replacement or does the 5 new wheels get you into a replacement schedule?
I would say no, because we repair our wheels as needed. Some of them are, the new school is 2004 was before my time. So they're, that's 17, 18 years old. We have a repairs contract, not contract, but a repairs account through Kilnray that they come and they'll replace foot pedals, they'll replace cords, they'll replace motors. So it's really when the body of the wheel just starts to break down beyond repair. So I think a typical wheel that's well maintained can go for 15 years. Or longer. They're they're a high quality machine. So, and they throw a lot of pounds of clay.
Jill.
The Art of Education that we
Yes.
bought a few years ago,
Yes.
you've been pleased with it all along, I know, but can you just give a quick
Sure.
update? on how you're
It's
using it?
mainly used by our elementary teachers because they have so many grade levels. So it's a great resource for them. So they each have their own membership. The high school, we like to pull it for students that need maybe something different to do in the classroom, or they are, sick and home and want something to work on. It's just a great resource for teachers to be able to go and kind of grab some lesson plans from there for those students. It's a phenomenal resource for just the day-to-day posters and rituals and routines and stuff that we just want to be able to grab and print and not have to reinvent the wheel for that's out there for our students and teachers.
Good stuff. Thank you for all that you do. It's just phenomenal up there, the pictures and all. Julie.
Thank you. For some of these materials that are expensive and getting more expensive, what things do we look at to try to bring those costs down? Like, can you buy in bulk and buy 3 years worth of canvases at once? Or are there any tricks like that?
So we don't look at that only because storage becomes a huge issue. So much of the stuff is just physical space. We try to, like with our clay, with 28 clay classes, we recycle as much clay as possible. So anything that doesn't become a finished product that goes into the kiln can go into a big bucket. It sits in water for a few days. We pull it out, let it dry, and then pug it through our pug mills. We have a pug mill with ceramics classrooms, and that regenerates the clay to be able to be used again. So that is our biggest saver. Things like oil paint, kids have to show me the empty tube before I'll go and get the new one. Just little tricks in the classroom to try to keep our costs down. Students understand the expense of the supplies, and especially when they go outside of DHS and have to take classes that they choose to take over the summer or something, like, oh my God, they cost so much money. They do, because it's all physical stuff and it's all consumed. But storage is our biggest issue for why we can't buy in larger quantities.
Thank you. Anything else? Casey, anything from RTM Education?
Sorry, guys. No, we're good.
Thank you, Casey. Jack, you good? CDSP? Sure, come on up. Didn't mean to wake you up. No.
I don't even know if this is done anywhere, but just in the guise of thinking differently about revenue stream, like, do they ever sell student art, or are there ways to potentially bring in revenue or I don't know. Anyway, thinking differently.
I've seen that happen.
It's really up to the student.
Yeah.
So
You had a great program up at the cafeteria up at the high school, and those students were figuring out who was interested in buying some of their artwork, and they were having some fun with it. So good.
Can we
Good,
get
thank
new
you.
artwork here?
this stuff came in about this time last year, and we're waiting for once we get through midterms, our AP photography classes will have done their critiques, and we'll have some new stuff to be able to bring in.
Great.
So by February.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At what charge?
Yeah, the rental
that ain't-
revenue's back. Anything from CPAC?
No questions.
Thank you. Anything from the public on RC 14-8? Art 8. Guess I'm hungry. All right, we will pause there for a quick lunch break. We're going to do a working lunch. So I think in the interest of everyone's time, we'll take a couple of minutes, get organized. If everyone's comfortable that we can eat and ask questions as we go along. And so we can make up some time here because it's a Saturday and we appreciate everyone's time here, but we'll see if we can get back on schedule. So we'll take a break right now for lunch. Thank you.